After years and years of speculation, a legacy sequel to the 1985 classic film The Goonies is slated to begin filming next summer with the original cast returning.
I'm setting booty traps.
You mean booby traps?
That's what I said! Booby traps!
I want to go home.
Don't say that! Goonies never say die!
Oh my God.
From Steven Spielberg.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday afternoon here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. You know, there are moments, even for someone such as myself, a lifelong film geek. I don't go to the movies very much, once or twice a year, but I am still a cineast. And there are certain times where even someone like me, mid-range Gen Xer, is taken completely by surprise. To the point where I continue to not believe, well, this can't be real, no matter how much confirmation I get. So, on the other side, when I heard there was going to be a Candyman reboot, or sequel as it actually was, I didn't immediately say, oh, that's bullshit. When the buzz began to build in the 2017 range that Tom Cruise was going to get back into the pilot's seat for a sequel to the original Top Gun, my first thought was, well, that's ridiculous. Obviously, Tom Cruise didn't think it was ridiculous, but I didn't immediately say, well, that's bullshit. Is it April Fool's Day? That's always the instinct with me. If I see something, I say, well, this isn't right. That's not correct. That can't be happening. Now, I don't know why, but when I saw a news story earlier today, and some of you may have seen it already, a sequel to The Goonies is in the works, and they're supposedly going to try to get things together to start shooting early next summer. My guess is if things come together quickly, they might do it even sooner than that. I had to continually Google to make sure, well, this struck me complete bullshit. There's no way this is right. They're going to get Sean Astin back, and Josh Brolin, Ki-Hai Kwan. I don't know about Kerry Green. I think she's retired from the movie business. But maybe Martha Plimpton, and Joe Pantoliano and Robert Davi, the Fratelli's mom, the late, great Oscar nominee, not for The Goonies, but for Throw Mama from the Train. Ann Ramsey has passed. And the actor who played Sloth was a professional football player, a terrific Pro Bowl caliber football player on the Al Davis Raiders, John Matuzak. He has passed. Pretty much everyone else is still around, although the mom of Mikey and Brand, Mary Ellen Trainor, I believe that she has passed also. But they're talking about making a sequel, and it seems that they have a script. See, there has been a lot of chatter going all the way back to when I bought the DVD for The Goonies, circa 2002-ish. And the entire cast, including, I believe, Kerry Green, who was already pretty much not in the movie business anymore, they all sat for a commentary track. And there was chatter 2 decades ago that they were trying to get things together for a sequel. Now, through Hollywood history, there are certain movies that we wait for a sequel, or for an official sequel to be more precise. And it doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. And then there are the weird situations where technically there are sequels, but they don't feel like canon. And to be more precise, 1983's A Christmas Story. There was a lot of talk that they were going to do a sequel because the film didn't do great at the box office, but then went berserk on VHS and on HBO and Cinemax. And they actually did a couple of movies based on the same book by Gene Shepard, one called Ollie Hopnoodle's Haven of Bliss. And then there was another one called It Runs in the Family, which was originally titled A Summer Story. Get it? A Christmas Story, a Summer Story. The problem is, didn't have any of the original cast members. And that is critical. When we think in terms of canon, it doesn't feel like canon if it isn't the original cast members. And this was the issue out of context, the Han Solo movie from a number of years ago, Alden Ehrenreich, that guy was great. But it doesn't feel like canon because there was nobody from the original cast in the film. And this is a problem with IP as you go forward and you have to replace certain actors and actresses. This is why if you can get the original cast back in some form, this is how you do it. So, for example, A Christmas Story, they had the movie that came out in December of 2022 with Peter Billingsley, the original Ralphie. None of the other actors who played an iteration of Ralphie that were not Peter Billingsley. So that's why The Goonies, this feels like a real legacy sequel. And why even someone like me, a hardened, veteran of this kind of BS, which usually doesn't play out the way we expect, I'm hopeful. And also because allegedly Spielberg is not only going to be involved in the production as he was with The Goonies. And let's face it, Richard Donner, who I love, was the director, but Spielberg's fingerprints are all over the original Goonies. That's not a criticism. In the same fashion that his fingerprints are all over Poltergeist, it almost feels like a movie that the Beard himself, that would be Spielberg, could have directed, even though Tobe Hooper, who had previously done the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, OG Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Great moments in New York University Film School history. This is a true story. My very first semester at New York University, fall 1994. One of the movies we screened in the horror film was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Remember, this is 1994. The movie was only 20 years old. So, end of the movie, mild spoilers. There's Leatherface running around, swinging the chainsaw around, swinging it around. The woman is screaming. We're going crazy in the screening room. We're watching it, and Leatherface is windmilling the chainsaw. And just before the credits roll, a kid sitting behind me goes, "There's Texas for you." That got a big laugh. There's Texas for you. But Tobe Hooper is credited as director with Poltergeist, but it feels more like a Spielberg film than a Tobe Hooper film. And honestly, I love Richard Donner, but The Goonies feels more like Donner was trying to make a Spielberg film, and that is, again, not a criticism. Steven Spielberg is one of the most talented people to ever work in the medium. It is not a knock on Richard Donner to say that he may have made certain directorial choices because Spielberg was nominally his boss on that film. I mean, the scene where the Cary Green character, Andy, is doing with the piano that's straight out of Temple of Doom. I mean, they could have put that scene in Temple of Doom. No problem. But this is a little bit also unusual. I am a fan of The Goonies. It is not one of my favorite films. I didn't see it in its original theatrical release. I did not see The Goonies in its entirety until HBO circa 1986-87. I liked it. I didn't love it. Over time, I have become more and more of a fan. And I feel like for what it tries to do, the film is just about perfect. It gets almost everything right, and the casting is so on point. And you never know if Robert Davi or Joe Pantoliano will be on board. But one of the pictures I saw promoting the sequel, there was a picture of Davi. So he's such a character on social media. He's a singer. He does all kinds of stuff. But I think it would be great if he and Joe Pantoliano came back as the Fratellis. Another thing that I like about social media in this context, and it is very heartwarming and inspirational. I mean, the two biggest stars in the cast, when you think about it right now, Ki-Hai Kwan winning an Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Josh Brolin, who's practically an end boss. He's had such an incredible run in the last couple of decades. But when Ki-Hai Kwan, who plays Data in The Goonies, and he's supposedly coming back as well, when he won his Oscar, the outpouring of joy, not only from regular fans such as myself, but people within the industry who had worked with him. Brendan Fraser, who they spent a couple of weeks shooting particular scenes for Encino Man. They shot those scenes in 1991. They hadn't seen each other in decades. So many different people on social media congratulating Ki-Hai Kwan, and the way the algorithm works, Ki Hai Kwan posts, he's crying at the Oscars, he posted, it's like the selfie king, all of this stuff. And then you see one dignitary after another congratulating him on the same post. Josh Brolin, great job, Data, that kind of thing. Robert Davi, I haven't even seen the movie, but I love you. You know, this just great, great stuff. And the camaraderie, decades later, you could still feel it. Because this had to have been a difficult shoot for everybody. The scene with the pirate ship and the water, all of those sequences, they could not have been easy to shoot. And there was that moment with the octopus, the giant octopus, which is mentioned at the end of the film. I think it's Chunk when he's yelling something about an octopus. We don't see it in the movie. That was a scene that ended up getting taken out of the film, and they left a line of dialogue. So if you're actually paying attention, you say, what octopus? What the fuck is he talking about? What, is he stoned? Yeah, maybe. But if they're able to, and that's the trick, the Christmas Story Legacy sequel is not as good as the first one. In fact, the whole first hour, maybe 70, 75 minutes, the story just does not really go anywhere. The ace up the sleeve of Peter Billingsley, who also served as one of the producers, one of the point people, and he talked about, we had so many different scripts for the last 25 years, meaning going back into like the 1997, 98 range. So we couldn't find one that we liked. There was a non-canon A Christmas Story 2. That doesn't count. Not the way that we're looking at this. But A Christmas Story Christmas, the last 20 minutes are so good. The movie is worth it. It's just barely a 2.5-star film. Whereas it's going nowhere, and I was getting frustrated, and then I realized what they were doing. Okay. But it's not as good as the first one. The hope is taking all this time and getting Spielberg on board. He's so good, and his shot making is so precise, the way that he knows how to arrange action sequences, it's almost impossible to imagine it being a bad film. I'd like to believe that with everyone who is already committed to it, I hope they've read a script and have said, this script is really good, as opposed to any old excuse to get the gang back together. Because honestly, if that's it, I understand. Because you don't have unlimited amounts of time to do this. Because people get older, people leave the business, people come back. But there's always a chance, like with Top Gun Maverick, that you do something really special and actually improve upon the original. Top Gun Maverick is a better film than the original Top Gun. It's not even close. And the original Top Gun, I think, is terrific. I think it's a better movie than history would normally remember it as. But it's still got there's a lot of kind of pat, rote, nonsensical, not even plot twists, but character interactions that they're just there because the plot has to move from point A to point B to point C. Top Gun Maverick, the whole thing with Goose's son and Maverick, that whole storyline could have not worked, but Miles Teller was so committed to that part, he really sold it. He really made me believe he could believably be Anthony Edwards' kid. It didn't feel like it was forced, and the kind of fractious relationship between Pete Mitchell and Rooster, it also could have gone south, but it didn't, because you felt that not only the tension between the guys, but the fact that Maverick really had tried to be a good father figure to him. He had tried to guide him in the right direction. The irony is he did guide him in the right direction, but not in the way that he wanted to. All of those kinds of high wire moments in that film. There is a possibility that something like that will happen when they finally shoot this. And I know that it's going to be reported on. Sean Astin and Ki Hai Kwan and probably Josh Brolin, who also is all over Instagram. He loves to share what he's up to with fans. He makes a lot of jokes. He's a character, kind of trading off the fact that we all know he was Thanos. But we'll probably be kind of getting a bird's eye view of getting into makeup and character, and Josh Brolin making jokes about stunts. I'm a father, and hopefully I don't die doing this stunt. There's no way that there's not going to be a lot of laughs to be had on social media, and Ki Hai Kwan is going to probably take 100 selfies with Spielberg. He's probably going to take a selfie with Spielberg every day. Also, how about the energy of Steven Spielberg? Spielberg, what is he, 77 now? and he's still jumping around like a kid. And for him to immediately agree to direct this when the principal photography is not going to start for at least another probably 8 months, I love it. In the same way that watching Martin Scorsese, he was a little older than Steven, I think he's 4 years older, but watching Martin Scorsese jump around the set of Killers of the Flower Moon like an intern, like a production assistant. He's hopping around the set. He's so excited. After all these years, the joy that Scorsese and Spielberg, the sense of wonder and magic that they clearly are still enthralled with the process of making movies. Man, how could you not love that? Especially if you're a fan of their work. The fact that they love what they do. And Coppola to a lesser extent, because Megalopolis, which is coming out, it's probably going to bomb. That was not an easy production. I mean, he spent the last 2 decades trying to make that movie before he was finally able to get it through. It just goes to show you, even a name like Coppola can't just snap his fingers and get a movie made. Let's look at Stanley Kubrick. The only reason why Stanley Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, the only reason why he was even able to get that made is who? 2 words, Cruise, Tom, and not in that order. If you don't have a big star that you can market around the world, even today, studios are not just going to throw $200 million at you. It's not the way it goes. Coppola doesn't move around as well as he does. He doesn't seem to be in as good a health. He is older than both of the other guys, but I mean, their buddy Brian De Palma, I think he's retired. But Spielberg still appears to be picture of health, fingers crossed, and without knowing any particulars. I mean, they gave like a little 1-sentence blurb, like the vaguest notion of an idea of what the Goonies 2 will be. Something happens, and Mikey stashed some of the treasure somewhere near the very end of the first movie, and that's what they have to find. If you remember how much of treasure there actually was, a little tiny bit might be worth 15 or 20 million today. I think that was the implication here. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Lord of the Rings. When I think of Sean Astin, my first thought is Rudy, and my second thought, Toy Soldiers, where Sean, as a prep schooler with a really shitty attitude, he kind of channels his inner John McClane to try to take down a terrorist takeover of his school. The movie is so ridiculous, but it's super entertaining. It is strange that I would think of those 2 movies, not so much Rudy, because Rudy is a film. There are many fans, especially sports fans, who have Rudy among their 2 or 3 favorite sports movies. It might be in my top 10. If it's not in my top 10, it's close. But he's really good. Because the thing with him is, at that age, he looked like an athlete, but he didn't look like a guy who could play football. And that's the thing. You look at somebody like myself, if I'm just walking around, you might say, okay, this guy probably played sports. Doesn't mean I look like a football player, for crying out loud. Yeah, maybe I could have been a cornerback, right? I'd have to be a tall, skinny guy or something like that. But I don't know what... See, like with the Candyman reboot / sequel, I had an idea, and what Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta did, they made the movie that Candyman 2 should have been in 1995 and wasn't. There is no, when the original Goonies ends, it's a pretty door slam type of an ending. So there is not anything where you say, oh, well, it has to be this or it has to be that. It just has to be engaging and entertaining. And the hope is that none of the actors and actresses who come back are just in it for, 2 minutes. You want whoever is in it to be an, integral part of the story. And I hope they're able to pull it off. I mean, I don't know. My assumption is that there are going to be certain Gen Xers, because really this is one of our movies. I was 10, 11 years old when this film came out. Missed it in theaters, but a lot of my friends... I remember Mr. Fink's 5th grade at good old Fairfield Elementary, spring 1985. A lot of my classmates went to see it, and every one of them loved it. This was just one of those movies that hit a certain segment of Gen X harder than most. And I don't think that any of those huge fans will sort of be opposed without knowing any particulars, but there is always the fear that if they don't get it right, it will kind of tarnish. But I don't think it'll tarnish the memories of the original. We've seen a lot of sequels that sucked. Karate Kid 2 is not good. Karate Kid 3 is not good. But Cobra Kai redeemed Karate Kid 3 because of how great Thomas Ian Griffith is returning as Terry Silver. So you never know how it's going to play out. But I'm hopeful and I'm excited. Not that I can't wait for this to come out. It's going to come out in the summer of 2026 or, who the fuck knows. But I'm excited. I'm glad that everybody seems that they all want to be on board and take part. And Spielberg, so you know that it's going to be a first-class production. They're not going to have to skimp on the budget. Spielberg, at this point, he doesn't report to anybody anymore. If he wants to spend $175 million, he can spend $275 million. He's going to make exactly the movie he wants to make. Just got to cross our fingers that it's a really good script. Sometimes people will drop out simply because they think that the story isn't that good. Keanu Reeves didn't make Speed 2. Now, it's only 3 years later. It was 3 years after the first one. It was not a legacy sequel. But Keanu, when he saw the direction the story was going in, he wasn't interested. He was right. It wasn't good. Nobody likes to call things like that a cash grab. You don't know what's going to hit versus what's not. Lethal Weapon 2 on the surface would have looked like a cash grab. Coming out only 2 years after the original, there are plenty of people that think Lethal Weapon 2 is actually better than the original because the villains, they're more villainous. They're more scumbaggish. And the humor between the characters, man, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, what incredible chemistry they had on screen. Who would have ever imagined that, right? But there's no way to know. And the unknown is a big part of what makes the Goonies so successful. All the talk about the map and One-Eyed Willie, there's a lot that they don't know. The movie fills in the gaps. Fingers crossed that Goonies 2, it's not going to be Goonies 2, The Search for One-Eyed Willie or The Curse of One-Eyed Willie. It's not going to be that. It could be Goonies 2, Goonies Are Good Enough. That was what I saw a poster that I don't know that is the real poster, but that's what it was. That's the famous song by Cyndi Lauper when Cyndi just blew up. Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I think that was the same album, or certainly recorded right around the same time frame. But yeah, color me incredibly surprised. If you had asked me a week ago, will there ever be a sequel to the Goonies? My instinct would have been to laugh. It's almost 40 fucking years. And I understand Top Gun Maverick, but hey, Top Gun Maverick was only going to be 33 and a half because that film was wrapped in 2019 and it was supposed to come out May of 2020 and then COVID. But I'm excited and I hope that all of you out there are excited. If you are, let me know. If you're not, if you're like, this is a fucking disaster in the making, hey, we don't know right now. But today is a day that we could, our inner geeks, we can show our inner film geeks to the world. It's perfectly okay. Goonies, good enough. Here comes summer 2026, and I'm guessing it's going to be Memorial Day. They're going to get it right at the beginning of the summer, assuming that everybody hits their marks and Spielberg is satisfied with how it all comes off. Unbelievable. A sequel to the Goonies. This has been episode 296 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me this kind of surprise episode. I mean, I'm clicking. Maybe it's still April Fool's. No, it's real. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of the others upon which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.